So yesterday we saw two parables for understanding what it means that the source is one and the results are many. And it's not like an amoeba, we said. It's more like the power of growth in the ground, which gives rise to...
You wouldn't call the ground the source. Source is the seed.
What?
The source is the seed.
Right. So we today would look at the seed and say that's where the growth is coming from. But you see that if you just put the seed in an envelope and leave it in your drawer, you won't get a tree.
But more important, if you don't put anything in the ground, you won't get a tree.
Of course. So that's why we see the ground as...
When it says in Tanya, one would think that it was the tree, it was the ground that was causing the growth. It says that the seed rots, which is quite a difficult concept to understand. How can it be the ground that's making the growth and nothing to do with the seed?
The ground is causing certain processes to happen within the seed, which cause the growth.
I said, no, that's not what the Tanya means.
There's not what the Tanya means. The Tanya means that the growth is coming from the ground.
Right.
Okay. We said that it's the same thing as with the sun, okay? That we've talked about many times, that the sheath around the sun was considered in ancient times to be around the sun. That's what was protecting us from the sun. Today we consider the sheath to be around the earth.
But that's only a technical difference.
Why?
Because
the focus has changed.
There's you and me, right? And for some reason, I don't want to look at you. So I can put a blanket over my head, or I can put a blanket over your head. It's the same difference.
Okay.
But here's a completely different thing.
I'm talking about the focus, not the mechanical aspect. The focus changed. In ancient times, the focus was more heliocentric, was more about, call it the sun, and now it became about the earth. Same thing with the seed. It used to be about the earth. And now it's about the seed. The focus changes, but the explanation remains pretty much the same. Even if you say that more of the, say it another way, in procreation. So who's making the child? Is it the father or the mother? Right? So you could say that it's more the mother, because in the end it's her womb and she's making all the differences. But you see that a woman alone can't give birth. She needs to be inseminated in some way. So it used to be that the focus was on the woman entirely, and the husband was a little bit on the side, and then suddenly you say, but no, but half of the genetic material is coming from the husband, and the sex is determined only by the husband, supposedly. So these things, they change in focus from ancient times to now, but what I tried to stress is that it would be incorrect to assume that they understood their explanation as a mechanistic explanation. Chazal, I'm not talking about the Greeks did. But the sages, when they adopted this explanation, I don't think they took it as a technical explanation, not mechanical. It wasn't, this is how it happens. Rather, this is how it's described as happening, and we're going to use how it's described as happening as a parable. Not necessarily thinking that this is how it actually happens. Okay, when the sages adopted a scientific viewpoint, regardless of when the science was, 3,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, doesn't matter, it changed over time. They knew it changes over time. It's one thing that they did know, and they make sure that we know that they knew, because they show us in a number of different places in the Talmud the different ways in which the same phenomena were explained over generations. And they used it because it fit not the facts, but the way that the Torah sees things. That was the big difference.
Mm-hmm.
So we're using it as a mashal. We're using it as a parable. We're not trying to say this is how it happens. You can't get hung up on their picture as if it's describing what actually happens. In truth, we will change our minds another 1,000 times in the next 100,000 years. And we'll keep changing our minds. Because it depends on how you describe it. There's many ways to describe the same thing. There's no one definitive answer. Yesterday I saw something amazing. I've never seen this before. I don't know how many people have ever seen it. Using high-speed photography. Well, it's not photography anymore. It's a camera that I think does 100,000 frames per second. Something ridiculous. Lightning was captured on this camera. It's very hard to catch it, but they caught it. And there's been a few successes in the world of catching lightning at that speed. What did they discover? Well, there's one thing that they knew already, which was that lightning, it makes its way down from the cloud not in a straight line at all. Meaning it's not going down. It's even going back up. You see that it makes like 50-foot increments each time, trying to push its way through the atmosphere. So you see the light going like in little steps of 50 yards each about. And it goes and it even goes back up and it comes down again. It stops and it follows another path. And many of these paths are lit up at the same time, so it looks like the lightning is just going down, but it's really sequential. It's like a search. It's almost like you would search for something through different doorways, trying to find the path of least resistance down to the ground, but it never reaches the ground. That's the astounding thing. What happens? I can't remember what they call them. There's lightning coming out of the ground. You see it. There's streams of light coming out of the ground. Why? Because the electrical field in the atmosphere is inducing charge to collect on the ground, and it's pulling it towards it. So you see streams. It could be hundreds of them under where the lightning is forming, and these streams can be, they said, anywhere from 3 feet to 150 feet long. 150 feet is 50 meters. That's taller than most buildings. Streams, and these things are coming out of the ground. They're coming out of buildings, out of trees. You might see them, and they're trying to reach it. And when they meet, when one of these streamers coming from below meets that ladder of steps of lightning anywhere, that closes the circuit, as it were. And then suddenly everything collapses into that path. So all the streamers will suddenly disappear and they'll all become the one that met. And all the lightning coming from above, all the different paths that tried to follow disappear, and all the charge goes through that one point of connection. And so what do you have? You have both the ground and the cloud are forming the lightning. And we thought it was just charge from the lightning coming down, from the cloud coming down. It's not true. And you couldn't know this. So this we now know, because there's no way to know this. There's absolutely no way to know this. Without this type of shutter speed, 100,000 frames per second, there's no way you could see this. Because it happens in microseconds. That changes your whole conceptual scheme of what lightning is. It's like a completely different story. So you think that in 100 years, when we have photography at the atomic level, we're not going to change our minds again? Of course we are. There's no question that we will. So when the sages adopt some metaphor, some picture, some explanation for how things are happening, they're not adopting it because they think this is the final description of what's going on. They adopt it because it fits the way they think. So when the Rebbe, the Middle Rebbe here is using this as explanations, he's using the metaphoric quality of it. He's not claiming that this is how the ground actually does it. It's true that there would be naive readers who read Chazal and would assume that. I don't think he assumes that. He understands I'm looking for the principle behind this. I'm looking for how this works in the mind, not how it works in it. Okay? So in the mind, it's a very beautiful example. It says, here you have something, a source, which gives, how would we call it, is enclosed within many, many products. Vine otam nachon. And finally, the principle is that you give one from psychology, one from nature, and then you give one in godliness, meaning in divinity. So on Kuf Pei Vav 186, והנה עוד טעם נכון למציאות התחלקות 10 ספירות מבחינת אינסוף הפשוט, והוא מטעם ייחוד וביטול 10 ספירות מעצמם, להיותן מתאחדין ובטלים במציאותם מבחינת אינסוף. The same thing happens with regard to the spheros. The spheros, each of them is like one of these trees, that the Ein Sof, that the infinite, which is simple, and it doesn't have, you can't say that there is this Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes within Ein Sof is the same thing as Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferes when they show up. It's not the same thing. In the same way that you can't say that the sweetness and bitterness of the apple and the olive tree are in the ground. You can't say it. What can you say? That they exist there in an abstract form. Just as the sweetness and bitterness exist in the ground in some abstract form. כי כל זה הוא עיקר עניין חוכמת הקבלה, שאינו כמו שערי החוכמות, שהוא להשיג את זה שכליים. This is the main thing that Kabbalah teaches. This is how it's different from other forms of wisdom. Why? Because other forms of wisdom are trying to understand some mindset, some fact in the world. But Kabbalah is not doing that. It's the opposite. Meaning that we're going in the opposite direction. In Kabbalah, we're trying not to analyze the world using the Sfirot, but rather explain how are the Sfirot part of the Ein Sof. We're going backwards. Say it like this: in biology, you're trying to explain how is it that the ground gives sustenance to different types of plants. The answer is that the ground contains different nutrients and different things that they all need. And so now you build this mechanism of how it works. And in Kabbalah, you would be doing the opposite. You would be asking, how are each of the trees that we see growing out of the ground contained in it? We're looking for the bittul. We're looking for the nullification of the lower within the higher. That's called yichud. That's called making something one. We're not looking to differentiate. We're looking to integrate, to unify. All of Torah, in that sense, is with a backdrop of everything is in God. But we don't learn that way, right? When you learn Talmud, you're not interested in how everything is one. If you learn that way, you won't understand anything. The Talmud is like regular knowledge. You differentiate more and more. You take another case and you see how this works, and you keep differentiating, trying to define things. But in Kabbalah, that's why it's called divine knowledge. Not because necessarily it came from the divine, even though all knowledge does, but because you're trying to understand how things unify within the one. That's its direction. That's what it's trying to do. You're trying to give an explanation. Why is it that the diversity is really unified? That's the real question that Kabbalah is asking. And it's going backwards. It's trying to push everything back into the one. and to explain to you how is it that the one contains everything. That's different than regular knowledge. It's the opposite of regular knowledge. And in a certain sense, this is what drives people crazy about, people who are secular or who have bought into the academic point of view find it very difficult to learn Chassidus or Kabbalah. Why? Because they see it as a cop-out. They say, you're doing the opposite from what you're supposed to be doing. You're ignoring the particulars. You're ignoring the details. Instead of having details, which is what the world is made out of, you're trying to convince me that everything is really generalized. You're trying to generalize everything. So it's all generalizations. What are you doing? This is not how knowledge is formed, and it doesn't do anything for me. It ruins me. It ruins my way of thinking. Because the way of thinking of most people, I don't think this way, so it's hard for me to say for most people, because I stopped thinking this way a long time ago. But when I learn Talmud, I have to think this way. But because most of the day I deal with Chassidus, so this is hard for me to understand that this would be foreign to someone. But most people can't think this way. They see it, smart people, they see it as not thinking. What are you doing? You're going backwards. We're supposed to differentiate and find more phenomena and see how they're different from one another. And you're looking to put everything back together. And that's the opposite from what we want. You follow what I'm saying? Let's say the big difference would be, like, for instance, between mathematics and other... if we would have to give a parable for this, it would be the difference between mathematics and other forms of wisdom. Mathematics is looking for generalizations. It's really what you're trying to do. You're not looking to separate the phenomena more and more. You're not saying, well, if I look at more and more numbers, I'll have more and more phenomena. No. It's enough for me to have numbers from 0 to 1. From 0 to 1 is enough. I can break it up however I want. That's enough for me. And from here I'm going to generalize into how everything behaves. And that's kind of strange. Like, when you're thinking about it, why would 200 act the same as I don't know, 189? What would be in common between, what would be common to the two, or something like, what would 169 and 221 have in common? Okay. Why would they have something in common? They're different. But then you say, oh, they're both this type of number. They have this characteristic that's the same in both of them. And in math, there's no great joy in finding a new number. Only in finding numbers that have certain characteristics, which we've already described. And that's great joy. Like, I find a new prime number that nobody knew about. And it's got 18 digits, and I'm very, very happy that I found this one. It doesn't divide by anything by itself in one. So in that sense, mathematics is different from all the other sciences. All the other sciences are, what can we discover? And if we discover it...
Mathematics is closer to Chassidus.
Mathematics is the closest to Chassidus. It's the closest to Kabbalah. It's wisdom. In every other science, you're looking for new phenomena that will hopefully open up a whole new set of rules that you've never seen before. Right? That's what people are really looking for. I mean, the ones who are really doing research. I'm not talking about the ones who are trying to explain everything. But the ones who are really doing research are looking for a new material that acts in a way that we've never seen. We have to redefine the laws of physics, because this new material does things that we've never seen. And that's when superconductors were found. So a lot of the laws of physics had to be rewritten in a certain sense. And they didn't fit. When quantum mechanics, or when particles were discovered, or atoms were discovered, all of physics had to be rewritten because Newtonian physics couldn't describe it. And now that there's dark energy, as they call it, everything has to be rewritten as more. Everything changes. Why? Because I found a new phenomena. If you find a new number, Nothing's going to happen in math. Nothing at all. There's no new phenomenon that's going to change anything. Okay. By the way, the same thing is true of music. Music also doesn't change because you found a new scale. It remains the same. Music theory is going to remain exactly the same. Okay?
Very interesting.
והוא גם כן עניין ייחוד העילה וייחוד התתה, שהוא עניין ייחודם במקורם. And this is also the main topic of Chassidus, which is ייחוד העילה, ייחוד התתה, right? This is the Mittler Rebbe. The Mittler Rebbe is famous for saying that he wanted his Chassidim to be such that when they met one another, they would speak about ייחוד העילה, ייחוד התתה, about the higher unification, lower unification. So higher unification just means how it's one in Hashem, and lower unification means how it's one even down here. So now he comes to how this mimer is called in Torah Or, and how it starts in Torah's Chaim. The Patach Eliyahu, this part of the Tikkunei Zohar, the introduction to Tikkunei Zohar, which is a passage in and of itself. It stands by itself. It's self-contained. It says, "Antu chad velo bechushban, chakim velo bechokma idiyah." That you are one and not in reckoning, and wise and not in the known wisdom. Ve'achar kach velav mikol inon midot klal. And then it says, you are not one of these measures at all, meaning you can't be measured. De'memet kasha reisha leseifa. That really, and we would have to see the mimer in Torah's Chaim to understand this. He said there he builds it all around this passage in Tikkunei Zohar, the Patach Eliyahu, and there he explains that the passage is divided into 3 parts, 3.5 actually, and the 3 parts are different from one another completely. How are they different? That it goes from below, from no, I don't remember the order. I'd have to look at it again. But each one of them is speaking about some different aspect of divinity. What does he say in Torah's Chaim? In Torah's Chaim he says these 3 aspects are later what the Arizal called Akudim, Nekudim, Vrudim. Okay, the 3 worlds, as it were. In Akudim he says all the vessels are in one, all the lights, all the Sfirot, are in one vessel. Yes? In Vudim, each light, each Sfirah has its own vessel, but they do not unify. And in Vudim, each Sfirah has its own vessel, and they're inter-included. Those are the 3 aspects. And these 3 are already described in Patach Eliyahu. So he says here, in short, that the parts of Patach Eliyahu contradict one another. It's true, because each one is describing something else. The mitchilat ha'ma'amar, in the beginning, mashma she'eno bechushban eser klal. It sounds like the number 10 is not relevant to describing the Sfirot. It's not relevant to describing godliness. Okay, so where are the 10 Sfirot? If 10 is not there, how can he have 10 Sfirot in the first aspect, this thing called velo bechushban, not in reckoning? There's no 10 there, there's only 1, only number 1. So where would you put the 10 Sfirot there? There's no place to put them. Right? What does the Arizal say? You're right. They're all in one vessel, that's why we call it 1. That's how the Arizal interpreted this. That's how we explained this. And you can't say that he's wise, and you can't say that he's understanding. The Sfirot are not used as revelatory instruments by him at that level. He doesn't reveal himself as wise, as understanding. Right? This is godliness before it encloses itself within the Sfirot. So what is God then? He's perfectly one, because there's no adjectives. He's not wise, he's not understanding, he's not compassionate. Okay?
He's above all.
He's above it. You can't describe it. Velav mikol inon midot klal. ואחר כך חוזר ואומר, and then later in the passage, in the Patach Eliyahu, he says, Chakim, ואחר כך חוזר ואומר, ולאו I missed something. ואחר כך חוזר ואומר, Chakim, ולא בחוכמה ידיעה. But then he said he's wise, but not the known wisdom, not the one that we're familiar with. So does he have wisdom or not? In the first passage you said the number 10 is not relevant, so he can't be Chakim, he can't be wise. He's not described as wise. In the second part you say he's wise, just not in the familiar type of wisdom. So even though it's not familiar wisdom, it's not the one we're familiar with, but it's still wisdom, it's still understanding. But then he says, and he's not any of the other faculties, any of the other measures, which is again saying that he's like not enclosed in anything. But to understand this, we have to say that what he says, that you are one and not in reckoning, meaning there's no 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and 8, and 9, and 10, that is referring to the Atzmus Ein Sof HaPashut. That is referring to the infinite in its pristine state, in its abstract state. There it does not use the number 10. You can't say that it differentiates into 10 different aspects. Because numbers, having more than one number, more than one, means that there is differentiation. There's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10. There's limits, there's boundaries between 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so on. But the infinite aspect of God's revelation, because it is infinite, pashut, and abstract, it can't be connected to the numbers, only to the number 1. Because it's something that is completely without form, without any kind of enclosement, cannot be connected to differentiation, because it's not differentiating. It's just one thing. Like we said, that the earth does not contain sweetness and bitterness in the way that we see sweetness and bitterness in the apple and in the olive tree. That's why he says in the beginning of Patach Eliyahu, and it's not in the reckoning. Because there he's talking about the infinite light, which is not differentiated. It's not reckoned into wise and understanding and knowledgeable and so on. And the another way that he says this is before 1, what do you count? Meaning that we're looking at this 1 that cannot even be counted. ובחינת חכים ולא בחוכמה ידיעה, משמע שיש איזו מציאות התחלקות, מאחר שנקרא חכים ומבין, אך שלא ידיעה, כבחינת 10 ספירות הגנוזות ממאצילן. And the fact that he after that says, but he is wise, just not in the familiar wisdom, so that's already talking about this 10 sfirot as they are in, meaning it's looking at the perspective of the sfirot as they are in the source. In the same way that we would say sweetness and bitterness are somehow in the earth. Yeah, you did. You'll think about it. You'll see you understand. It's much simpler than you think. Where is the eyesight before you open your eyes? It's not there. It's the same question as. It's the same question as. Where am I? Where is my power of thought when I'm not thinking? No, when you're asleep.
Not thinking, so then at least the gate opens for other things to come.
But if you're not exercising it, if you're not expressing it, it's still there. But it cannot be sensed, it cannot be experienced. Is there fire in the matches?
No.
Yes, there is.
When you strike it, you see the fire.
Right. So there must have been something there.
You know that it works when you strike it, and then you can't use it afterwards.
So that's something else. It changed its state. But that's like called the Flintstone. and the fire, the spark that comes out, is a spark inside the stone or not?
No.
Yes, it is.
No, we make it.
No. So again, that you can say the same thing about the tree. The sweetness is not in the ground, because the sweetness. So where is it? It's not in the seed either. You can eat the seed; it's not there.
Which is manufactured. So the tree is not there either.
So what would you
The
say?
seed is there.
So what would you
The tree is
say?
manufactured, so also the taste is manufactured as part of the
What
process.
do you see though? You see that you had a seed, you put it in the ground, and now you got an apple.
Right.
Talk to me about manufacturing, not manufacturing. I'm not interested. I'm asking you, where was the sweetness? They can't get something from nothing.
You got a tree from nothing.
No, you didn't. You got the tree from the nutrients in the ground and the seed, and water and sunlight and all these things.
Same things also make the sweetness.
So is the sweetness in the sun?
No.
Where did it come from?
Came from all those things.
Stop thinking mechanistically. Where did it come from?
Where does the cake come from?
No.
Cake comes from mixing together an egg and water and flour.
So is the
and
cake
stirring.
in?
Well, there's no cake in.
So is the cake in the eggs? Is it in the flour?
No. It's a combination. It has to be put together.
Fine. Where did the sweetness come from?
Combination of the two things.
You're telling me how it's made. I'm telling you where it's. I'm asking you where did it come from? This is the difference between a modern scientific mindset and the mindset of a philosopher, or the mindset of Kabbalah, which is looking for the essence behind things. So you're saying, where is the eyesight from? You see that you have power of sight. You can define it any way you want, but you see that you have power of sight. You see that there's sweetness. You experience these things. Where did they come from? So you keep telling me they're formed by, these are the ingredients you need.
Right.
That doesn't tell me where it comes from. You just told me what it's made out of. Very nice. I'm thrilled to know what it's made out of. I'm asking, where did it come from? So the modern scientific mindset would say, because I'm a reductionist, I would say it doesn't exist outside of these ingredients. If you don't mix these ingredients together, there is no such thing as sweetness.
That's what I said.
But that's not true. That's simply not true.
There's no sweetness in this.
How do I know that's not true? Because if it doesn't exist outside of these ingredients, why can I detect it?
Outside these ingredients for this particular inyan.
Why would I pick it up? Why would I pick up sweetness if the only thing it is just a bunch of ingredients put together?
Because it's changed to become something else.
But why would I have receptors for it?
That's what Hashem made.
So now you're saying that I have to ask what is the cause and what's the effect now? If I assume that both of them were created together, mele, but I see that it's not the case, because I'm not a tree, and there's nothing in me that makes an apple. I don't make anything sweet.
You do make apples because you plant them in the ground. I have to go to the roof. The clock is so wrong. It's crazy. You need 10 o'clock.
Okay.